Charlotte Motor Speedway. 7:40 in the morning. Fog still hanging on the cold asphalt. Drew Halstead finishes 3 warm-up laps, pulls into pit lane, kills the engine. He sits 30 seconds before he lifts his helmet, shakes his head once, does not speak. The backup driver climbs in. Half a lap. He walks out of the car with his hands shaking. Conrad Pell shouts into the radio. The radio stays quiet. Lenora Ashford turns to her lead driver. "What's the real reason?" Drew just looks at her. 20 meters back, behind the pit fence, stands the black single dad her company refused to pay. Before we go back to the morning that broke every rule in the shop, take a second to subscribe. This story earns its ending, and you will not want to miss what the cameras catch when no one expects it. 31 days earlier. A single-bay garage on the edge of Salisbury, North Carolina. Malachi Beaumont signed for a flatbed delivery that filled half his shop. The car was a stock frame chassis, brand new last season, totaled the week before in a sponsor test incident at Bristol. The Ashford Motorsports paperwork said 30 days, $47,000. No extensions. The contract had been signed at the Ashford headquarters in Mooresville and countersigned by the team principal, Lenora Ashford. Malachi had not heard the name until it appeared at the bottom of the page. He had heard of her father. Everyone in the sport had. The accounts representative who delivered the contract had asked twice if his ASE master certification was current, and asked for a notarized copy before sending the file. Malachi had handed it over without changing his face. He initialed the page without looking at the timeline. It was the biggest contract he had taken in 2 years. His son Micah sat on the high stool by the workbench, 8 years old, sketching pistons in a notebook he kept open to the back. He had drawn cylinders since he could hold a pencil straight. Malachi checked the boy's lines without saying so, then tapped one with the eraser end. "Wear pattern there. That ring's been seating uneven." Micah erased the line and redrew it. He did not ask a second question. The first week, Malachi worked the body. The second week, the drivetrain. He played the radio low, classic country, the kind Camille used to leave on in their old kitchen. Micah came after school and on Saturdays. He did not ask about his mother. If he asked, Malachi sat with him. Most evenings Malachi cooked, red beans and brown rice, carrots cut into squares. He asked Micah about long division, about a boy at school who had taken his pencil and given it back. He did not ask about Camille. Some questions were the boys to bring up first. In Mooresville, on a Tuesday afternoon, Lenora Ashford signed the same contract from the other side of her father's old desk. She did not read the line about the contractor's name. She trusted Conrad to vet the work. The counter-signature was a formality. She slid the page back into the folder and moved on to the next item. That was how the contract reached Salisbury with both their names on it. In the third week, Malachi pulled the suspension. He laid the right side arm across the bench under the lamp and stopped moving. He knew the failure mode. He had written about it once. The microfracture pattern ran along the upper joint. Same place, same tolerance error, same vendor stamp. 7 years had passed since he had last seen it, and the vendor had not corrected the design. He stood there a long time. The radio played a song Camille had liked. He did not turn it up. He did not turn it down. He just looked at the part. The white paper on this exact failure mode had been published in the SAE Journal in 2017. Industry engineers cited it in design reviews. In half the citations, his name had been shortened to Est Beaumont. In a few, his name appeared below a co-author he had never worked with. Malachi had not chased the corrections. He had been busy with other work. He had been alive in a way that did not require corrections to feel real. The failure he had written about had killed Camille. Not in those words. The cover note that buried the memo never used the word killed. It used the word incident. He sat back at the bench, opened a clean sheet of grid paper, and began drawing the corrected geometry from memory. He did not call Ashford. He did not adjust the contract. The original quote covered a rebuild. What he was about to do was something else. The redesign would cost him about 60 extra hours of his own labor, plus material he would have to absorb. He would not be billing for it. The contract did not authorize the design change, and writing an invoice for unapproved work was a door he had no interest in opening. He noted the additional design work on the back of the file copy. 60 hours, no charge. For the record, Micah looked up from his cylinder drawing. "Dad, Why are you doing it different? Malachi kept drawing. Because the car needs to come home from every track it sees. Micah considered that. The first one didn't? Malachi's pencil paused. Then it continued. Some don't. Micah went back to his drawing. After a while he passed Malachi the page and pointed at one circle he had corrected. The line had been off by a hair. Malachi looked at it, nodded, and erased the line on his own draft. That same afternoon, in Mooresville, Lenora was reviewing the design library her father had kept current for 2 decades. Her eye caught on a cited paper on chassis dynamics. She read the author line. S. Beaumont. She did not know yet that the S stood for Malachi. She made a note in the margin of her review and moved on. Her father had told her once, when she was 22 and home from Darden for the summer, that the best engineers in the sport sometimes had the smallest signatures. She had thought he was talking about modesty. He had not been talking only about that. By day 28, the rebuild was finished. The chassis sat under the work lamps with the new geometry. The welds dressed down so cleanly that under good light the joints almost disappeared. Malachi ran his hand along the right arm and felt nothing he had not put there himself. Day 29, he submitted the invoice. $47,000. The figure on the contract. He noted the additional design work in a small line at the bottom. No charge. For the file. 2 hours later, the reply came in from Ashford Accounting. Invoice declined per COO directive. Non-network contractor. Referred to compliance review. Malachi read the email once. He set the phone down on the bench. He looked at the car. He did not call. He had stood in front of larger walls than this one. He had learned that raising his voice only helped the people who had built the wall feel like they had built it for the right reasons. Micah did not know about the email. He was at the kitchen table doing long division. Malachi finished tightening one bolt and went inside and sat across from him. You stuck on one? No. Want me to leave you alone? Yes. Malachi smiled, the kind of smile that did not reach his teeth, and went back to the garage. 5 days before the test session at Charlotte, Lenora sat in the corner office on the second floor of Ashford Motorsports in Mooresville, the smell of her father's old cigars still in the curtains, working through the quarterly cost review. Her eye stopped on a single line. 47,000, declined. Non-network contractor. She picked up the phone. Conrad Pell answered on the second ring. He had been her father's chief of staff for 19 years. He explained without explaining. A Salisbury mechanic. No top-tier ASE certifications, billed at team rate, declined per standard procedure. 2 approved shops were closing the rebuild as a salvage exercise. The certification statement was not true. Lenora had personally reviewed the contractor vetting binder Conrad's office, had submitted that quarter, and the page on Malachi Beaumont had listed ASE Master, NASCAR Certified Chassis Specialist, and an SAE membership going back 14 years. She did not say so on the phone. She said, I'd like to see the car. She walked down to the hangar herself. The crew was rolling the chassis through the wide doors when she arrived. She circled it once, then put her hand on the hood. The weld seams along the front clip were so smooth she had to look twice. The right side arm sat a fraction differently than the factory drawings she had pulled that morning. Not different by accident, different by intention. Otis Granger was standing 2 bays over, pretending to read a clipboard. When she turned, his eyes slid past hers. She filed that. She drove to Salisbury that afternoon, alone. No driver, no assistant, no call to Conrad. On the way out of the lot, she called her assistant and canceled 3 afternoon meetings without explaining. It was the first time she had done that since her father's funeral. Malachi was leaning over a camshaft when she stepped through the open bay door. He did not look up right away. When he did, he said, You didn't drive 35 minutes to explain why your company won't pay. There's a reason. That's enough. Lenora said, I didn't come to explain. I came because of the weld seam on the car. Malachi looked at her then. Really looked. They talked for 10 minutes. He did not boast. He did not defend. He walked her through the vendor tolerance failure on the arm and the redesign he had built in. When she asked why he had absorbed the cost, he said, Because if that car runs its first lap with the original part, there may not be a second lap. He did not add a word. She asked who had funded the original failure analysis. He said the work had been done at Brennan, and that the redesigned drawings were his. He said it the way a carpenter would say he built a chair. No emphasis. Lenora thanked him for his time and turned to leave. That was when she saw the photograph. It was tacked above the file cabinet by the door. Sun-faded, 4x6, an old team shot. Brennan Racing R&D, 2014. Back row, third from the left, a younger Malachi stood next to a woman with grease on her cheek, smiling at the camera. The caption read, in small print, Beaumont Chassis Group, Lenoir stopped. Beaumont Chassis Group was a footnote in the racing industry intellectual property case study she had read at Darden. The chassis dynamics white papers her engineers still quoted in design reviews had been written by a team headed by an engineer named S. Beaumont. She did not ask. She walked out to her car. In the driver's seat, she sat for a long minute before she typed his full name into her phone. The first article was from NASCAR Magazine, 2019. Brennan engineer steps away. After wife's fatal test crash, walks away from sport. Camille Beaumont, development driver, 31 years old. The second article was older, 2017, a profile in an industry trade. The youngest black lead engineer ever to head a chassis program at Brennan. Quoted in white papers, the piece counted, almost as an aside, 3 times he had been asked to rederive the same calculation in front of the same review board. He had not complained on record. He had ended the interview with one line. The math doesn't care who's holding the pencil. Lenora read the article twice. Her hands were cold. She did not start the car for another half hour. She did not call Conrad. When she finally drove back to Mooresville, she took the long route, past the small body shops and the cattle fences, the radio off, the late sun cutting across the dashboard. The man in the photograph was the man who had welded the seam she had touched. She did not know yet what she was going to do. She knew she was going to do something. That evening, after dark, Malachi was wiping down his bench when his phone buzzed. The number was not in his contacts. The message was short. 8 a.m. tomorrow. Diagnostic only. Telemetry verification. I'll meet you at the gate. Lenora. He set the phone down. He looked at the spot where the chassis had stood for the last 30 days. He stood there a while, then he typed back, yes. He arrived at 8. Micah was in the passenger seat. The boys' school had closed for the day for a plumbing failure, and Malachi's regular sitter had a doctor's appointment. He had brought him along because the alternative was not bringing him. Lenora met them at the gate herself. She caught a half-second on Micah. Long enough for the boy to put out his hand, formal and steady, and say, "Pleased to meet you, ma'am." She shook his hand without making a thing of it. Then she opened the side door, walked him into the lobby, found the staff lounge, and pulled a small carton of milk from the refrigerator. She set out a plate of the cookies someone had brought in for a birthday. She did not say, "I understand." She did not say single parents are amazing. She did not say what a brave young man you are. She just got the boy seated at the round table with a notebook and a pencil from her own bag. While Malachi went down to the dyno bay with Otis, Lenora sat across from Micah for 5 minutes. She asked what he was drawing. He showed her a report. She said, "Why is it teardrop-shaped instead of round?" Micah explained flow separation at the radius. He used the term separation point. He was 8. Lenora did not pretend to be surprised. She asked, "Your dad teach you that?" Micah said, "Dad draws it first. I fix it." She caught her own face in the glass of the cabinet behind him. She did not know the expression she was wearing. Down at the dyno bay, Malachi was walking Otis through the new suspension geometry. Otis stopped him halfway. "You know this layout was published in an SAE white paper, 2017. Malachi said, "I wrote the white paper." Otis exhaled and went back to the readings. He did not apologize. Malachi did not need him to. The two of them moved on to the next data line. Conrad Pell came through the bay doors 20 minutes later without a meeting on the calendar. He saw Malachi. He stopped mid-stride. His voice was tight. This contractor's invoice was declined. He should not be on the floor. Lenora came in from the lobby corridor, calm. "He's here at the team principal's invitation." "That is still me." Conrad looked at her for a long second. He did not raise his voice. He just turned and walked out. There would be consequences. They both knew it. Malachi did not look at Lenora, did not nod a thanks. He bent over a bolt and checked the torque again, because that was his job. and his job did not depend on whether Conrad was in the room. Lenora saw the small motion. She filed that too. At the end of the day, Malachi walked Micah to the passenger door of the truck. Lenora stood at the entrance to the lobby with her hands in her coat pockets. She did not wave. Malachi backed the truck out, and when it was pointed toward the gate, Micah turned in his seat and looked back at her through the rear window. Lenora, without really deciding to, lifted her hand a few inches. Micah lifted his back. It was a small thing. A child noticing an adult deciding to be noticed. Malachi, at the wheel, did not see it. Lenora stood at the lobby door until the truck cleared the security gate. Then she went back upstairs to the office that had been her father's and began making a call to a firm she had been thinking about hiring for 2 weeks. She decided on the elevator. By the time she sat down at the desk, she had already dialed. Within 48 hours, Conrad had called an ad hoc shareholder meeting with 2 of the older board members. The framing was protective. The team principal had introduced an unverified contractor into the primary competition program. Piedmont Energy, the lead sponsor, phoned Lenora that evening. She did not defend. She listened. She thanked them for the call. She promised an update within the week. When she hung up, she put her phone face down on her father's desk and did not move for a full minute. Then she opened her laptop and confirmed the engagement letter she had signed earlier that afternoon with a forensic accounting firm out of Charlotte. Independent vendor audit. 3 years back. Discreet. The retainer was paid from her personal account. The firm understood the brief. The next morning, Conrad sent 2 safety auditors to Malachi's garage in Salisbury. They arrived without warning, badges out, looking for code violations. Malachi walked them through the bay without raising his voice. He showed them his certifications, his vendor logs, his current shop inspection. One auditor asked to see the originals of his certifications twice, even after holding the originals in his hand. The other opened the 3rd drawer of the file cabinet without asking. Malachi stood near, hands loose at his sides, said nothing extra. There was nothing to find. One of the auditors, on the way out, paused near the boy sitting on a folding chair by the bench. He said, "Son, you hear a lot when your dad's working?" Malachi put down the wrench. He stepped between the auditor and Micah. He did not raise his voice. The voice was the same one he had used 5 minutes before. "You can ask me. He's 8. You don't ask him." The auditor took a half step back. The posture closed the conversation. The 2 of them left. Malachi did not say anything to Micah about it. He finished the head he was working on, washed up to his elbows, and drove the boy across town to the small pizza place they liked. Over the booth, Micah did not ask about the men. He asked, "Is Miss Lenora going to come around again?" Malachi said, "Maybe." Micah nodded once. He did not push. After a moment, he cut his half of the pizza into 8 even pieces, the way Malachi cut his, and slid 2 of them onto Malachi's plate without asking. In the truck on the way home, Malachi turned the radio to the country station Camille had liked. He did not turn it off when the song he remembered came on. Micah fell asleep against the window. Malachi drove the last 6 miles slow. That same night, Lenora was in her father's office past 9. She had the old leather photo album open across her knees, going through the years she had not paid attention to when her father was alive. She found what she had been looking for in the 2018 section, Performance Racing Industry Conference, Indianapolis. Her father shaking hands with a younger Malachi Beaumont. On the back of the photograph, in her father's handwriting, 4 lines in pencil. "Best engineer I never hired. Asked 3 times. Respect his answer. Try again next year." Lenora set the photograph on the desk. She looked at it for a long time. She understood then that her father had left her something. Not the company, not the building. A standard. She opened her laptop. The email was short. "The test session at Charlotte is Thursday morning, 7 a.m. 2 of our drivers will be running the car. I would like you there. No reason required. Just be there, Lenora." Malachi received it in the garage in Salisbury. He read it. He did not reply. He sat for a while looking at the spot the chassis had occupied for the last 30 days. He had finished the job he was paid for and the job he was not. There was nothing more for him to do in this garage. He knew what was coming. He did not yet know what he was going to do about it. Past 10 that same night, Otis Granger knocked on Lenora's office door. He had a manila envelope under his arm. the corners soft yellow from being folded into the same lines for 7 years. He set it on her desk and did not sit down. Inside was a memo Malachi had written 4 weeks before Camille's run. Signed at the bottom, 3 pages, dated. The memo named the vendor, the part, the failure mode. Camille was listed in the risk analysis as the driver scheduled for the upcoming program. The cover note from Brennan Management, paper clipped to the front, never addressed the data. It said the engineer's tone is becoming difficult to manage and forwarded the memo to a file marked for review. The file had never been opened. Otis said, "He doesn't know I kept it. I wasn't in management. They sent it to me because they wanted someone else in the room when they put it down." Lenora read the memo twice. Her hand stopped on Camille's name in the risk analysis section. She did not cry. She folded the pages along their original creases and slid them back into the envelope. "Does Malachi have a right to use this?" Otis said, "The NDA on him is airtight, but if you hold the document, not him, your counsel can find a way." Lenora understood. She put on her coat. She did not go home. At 5:40 in the morning, before the sky had started to gray, she pulled up in front of Malachi's garage in Salisbury. The bay light was on. He had not slept. She did not knock. She pushed the side door open and walked in. He was at the bench, hands black with bearing grease, adjusting a camshaft because his hands needed to be doing something. He looked up. He was not surprised. She set the envelope on the bench. He wiped his hands on a rag and opened it. He read one line. He read another. Then he sat down on the metal stool beside the bench, slowly, like his legs were no longer quite under him. Lenora stood 2 paces back. She did not speak. Through the small window above the workbench, the sky over Salisbury began to lighten. He had not moved. After what felt like a long time, he said very quietly, "I forgot what my own handwriting looked like." He did not look up. He talked first. He did not work up to it. He spoke the way men speak when they have rehearsed silently for years and finally let the rehearsed sentences out. He had written the memo 4 weeks before Camille's run. Management had acknowledged it and continued. Camille had read it before he sent it. She had told him to push it. She had agreed to run the program anyway because the calendar wouldn't let her step out without losing her seat. She had trusted him to keep pushing. He had been pushing. He had not been fast enough. He had been on the pit wall the day she ran. He stopped there. He did not describe what he had seen. He did not need to. Lenora did not say "I'm sorry." She did not speak for the dead, or for the sport, or for her father. She said, "That memo proves you were right. The sport owes you that much." Malachi said, "The sport doesn't owe me anything. Camille's gone. The memo doesn't fix that." "No," she said, "but it can fix the car standing in our hangar. Conrad has the board meeting on the calendar for noon. He's pushing for liquidation. I need 1 lap that proves the car runs, 1 lap that the board can't argue with. You have 2 drivers. 2 drivers refused. The only person who knows how that car drives is sitting in front of me. I haven't driven in 7 years. She did not beg. She put her hand on the bench, not near his. "I'm not asking for the company. I'm asking because of that memo. If the car runs clean today, the board has to look back at why they didn't run it clean then." That's something Camille never got. The line landed. Malachi did not answer. She got up. At the door she said, 7:30, Charlotte Pit Lane. I won't call again. You come or you don't." She left. He sat at the bench another 20 minutes after the sound of her car was gone. At 6:45, he loaded Micah into the truck and drove him over to Mrs. Hadley, the neighbor 4 houses down who watched the boy when there was nowhere else. In the truck, Micah said, "Are you going somewhere today, Dad?" Malachi said, "Maybe." Micah did not ask the second question. When he climbed down from the truck at Mrs. Hadley's porch, he turned back and said, easy as if he were reminding him about a lunchbox, "Don't forget your seatbelt, Dad." Malachi stopped with one hand on the truck door. That had been Camille's line. Every test session, every shakedown. "Don't forget your seatbelt." Micah had been 1 year old when she said it last. He had no way of knowing. He stood in the driveway a long minute after the front door had closed behind his son. Then he got back in the truck and drove east, toward Charlotte Motor Speedway, toward the chassis he had built and the people who had not believed him. Charlotte Motor Speedway. 7 in the morning. Drew Halstead pulled out for 3 warm-up laps. Telemetry came back clean. Tires were up. He brought the car into pit lane and killed the engine. He sat in the cockpit for 30 seconds before he lifted his helmet. When he finally got out, he stood by the door and said, "Steering's lighter than I'm used to. Rear feels alive, don't trust the feel." Conrad said into the radio, "Bring it in." It was already in. Tate Mallory, the backup, climbed in next. He was 24 and trying to make a name. He ran half a lap, came in, and got out with his hands shaking. Something under the floor. "I don't know. Doesn't feel like one of ours." Neither driver was lying. Malachi had corrected a tolerance flaw the rest of the fleet had been silently compensating for. The car now responded the way the original drawings said it should, to muscle memory built on a flawed baseline. That response felt wrong. Conrad had poured doubt over that gap the night before, in 2 separate phone calls. He had framed the conversation as concern. The drivers had filled the rest in with refusal. As Drew came past the pit wall, he muttered something to Tate. It was not loud. The crew heard. Otis heard. It was not about the chassis. It was about the man behind the fence. The word he chose carried 2 weights at once. Nobody moved. Otis kept his eyes on the data screen and his jaw tight. Malachi, standing outside the barrier in a faded jacket and steel-toed boots, did not change his face. He had lived enough mornings like this one to know which moments were worth speaking and which moments the data would speak through. Conrad turned to Lenora, in front of everyone on the pit wall. "This is a depreciating asset. I'm recommending salvage. I've already prepared the documentation." Lenora did not answer him. She walked around the car instead. She laid her hand on the hood. She turned, and she looked across the pit lane at Malachi. "Do you have anything to say?" Malachi walked over. He did not touch the car. He spoke to Drew, not to her, not to Conrad. "Did the rear feel light coming into turn 1 entry?" Drew blinked. "How did you know that?" Malachi said. "Because the rear is supposed to feel light there. The car you've been driving was wrong. This one is right." He paused. He looked at Lenora a second. He did not promise anything. He said, "I'll run it." Otis went into the back of the trailer and came out with the driver's suit Malachi had walked away from in 2019. He had kept it in a cabinet at his house for 7 years. It had been cleaned. It still fit. Malachi changed in the back room. When he stepped out, Otis looked at him once. He did not say anything. He handed him the helmet. Malachi's hand was steady when he took it. Lenora arrived at the pit wall at 7:28. She stayed behind the fence. Malachi walked around the car once. He set his hand on the hood. He bowed his head a second. Then he climbed in. The engine came alive in the empty pit lane at 7:30 in the morning. The sound carried up into the empty grandstands. The only people present were Lenora, Otis, 2 technicians Malachi had asked Otis to pull in, and an SCCA observer Lenora had retained the previous afternoon so that the telemetry would carry official weight. No Conrad. No press. No drama in the stands. Empty seats, empty corporate suites, the kind of quiet most of these grandstands never see. Malachi ran 2 warm-up laps. He kept the speeds low while the tires came up to temperature. He let the brakes bed. The car responded to inputs in a clean line on the timing screen. No scallops, no hesitations. On the 3rd lap, he opened it up. There was no soundtrack. There was no announcer. There was the engine, the tires, the wind across the open cockpit, and the muted hum of the timing system on the monitor in the pit box. The first corner, the corner Drew and Tate had walked away from, he took its speed. He did not muscle it. He guided it. The car held its line through the apex, swept out wide on the same arc Drew had felt was wrong, and came onto the backstretch carrying speed that Drew had not been willing to commit to. He ran the same line for 3 more laps. The variation across all 4 laps, as measured against the optical sensors on the pit straight, was less than a single foot. By the 5th lap, his time was inside 3% of Drew's qualifying best. He was not chasing the record. He was driving the car as the chassis had been designed to be driven. The telemetry showed the suspension load distribution sitting clean in the design window. The aero balance held steady at 3 different speeds. Otis, standing next to the data screens, did not need to read the numbers. He had seen Malachi run cars like this before. He was nodding to himself, slowly, the way a man nods when something he had been carrying alone for 7 years is finally being seen by someone else. Lenora watched from the pit wall with one hand on the fence. She did not turn to look at anyone. She watched the lap times update on the monitor and the suspension load curves stay flat in the design band, and she did not move. A black Cadillac rolled through the pit gate near the end of the 6th lap. Conrad Pell got out. With him were 2 board members and a corporate attorney. Someone in the crew had called. He came to the timing monitors, looked at the lap data, and read the suspension load curves. He had been in the sport long enough to read them. His face did not pale. It closed. Malachi came in after 7 laps. He shut the car down. He sat in the cockpit a full minute before he reached up to release his helmet. When he climbed out, his suit was wet through at the collar. He did not look up at the sky. He looked at the steering wheel for a moment, his gloved hand still resting on the rim. Then he let go. Lenora crossed the pit lane to the car. She put her hand on the hood, near the spot Malachi's hand had just left. She looked at him through the windscreen, and what she said was small and clean. "Thank you." Malachi nodded. He did not speak. Otis put his hand on Malachi's shoulder as he came past. The old crew chief's hand shook a little. Malachi laid his own hand on Otis's a second. They did not look at each other. It was enough. The car was rolled slowly back toward the paddock. Malachi walked behind it. Lenora walked next to him, a meter apart. Conrad stood at the timing monitors and watched them go. He had taken out his phone. He had not yet called anyone. At noon, the board met on the 3rd floor of the Ashford building in Mooresville. Conrad had set the meeting a week earlier to push for liquidation and review Lenora's competency. By the time he sat down, that agenda was gone. Lenora came in last with 3 folders: the morning's SCCA, certified telemetry, the original rebuild contract with Conrad's declined payment notation in his own initials, and then the forensic firm's preliminary report. She did not attack, she presented data. Over 3 fiscal years, 73% of vendor contract value had been routed to 3 vendors. 2 held minority interests connected, through an LLC, to Conrad's wife's real estate holdings. The firm had flagged it as preliminary. Conrad did not raise his voice. He argued procedure and due process, citing the absence of conclusive findings. Beatrice Ainsworth spoke for the first time that day. She did not address the room. She addressed Conrad. "Walter trusted you for 19 years. I'd like you to explain that LLC to the board, not to me." Conrad did not have a quick answer. The vote was 3-2. Conrad was suspended pending the audit. Lenora then moved to pay the Beaumont invoice in full plus a performance bonus calibrated against the morning's telemetry. That vote was 5-0. Afterward, Lenora walked down to the hangar where Malachi stood by the chassis, hands in his pockets. She handed him an envelope. Inside was a contract. Malachi Beaumont, Chief Engineer, Development Program, Ashford Motorsports. No driver title attached. He read it twice. "You know I'm not coming back to compete," she said. "I'm not asking. I'm asking you to build. Driving is your decision." He folded the contract into his coat pocket. 3 weeks later, late October, a Saturday afternoon. The sun angled low across the new development bay. Ashford had cleared for him no bigger than the garage in Salisbury. He had asked specifically, same yellow work lamps, same workbench, moved up from Salisbury. Radio low, classic country, the kind Camille had liked. Micah sat on the high stool by the bench, redrawing a combustion chamber profile Malachi had sketched that morning. He looked up. "Did I get it right this time, Dad?" Malachi did not turn from the bench. "You got it right. I corrected mine off your draft." Micah did not grin. He nodded, the way men nod to each other in a trade. Lenora came in with 2 cups of coffee. She set one at the corner of Malachi's bench and kept the other. She did not mention the contract. Signed 2 weeks earlier. Nothing needed discussion. She asked Micah about his drawing. He explained why the port radius was teardrop-shaped instead of circular. She asked the right technical question. He answered it. She nodded like an engineer. No false amazement. This time the boy smiled. A small one, but his. Micah asked to go watch the chassis on the test rig. Malachi said yes. The boy hopped off the stool and was gone. The garage went quiet. Just the 2 of them. Lenora set her cup down, not looking at him. She said, "I found a note on the back of a photograph last week. My father took it of the 2 of you at Pry in 2018. He wrote, 'Best engineer I never hired. Asked 3 times. Respect his answer. Try again next year. Malachi was quiet. After a while he said, he asked a fourth time on the phone. 2 months before he died. I was going to say yes. I never did. Lenora turned her head the first time in the conversation. She had looked at him straight on. She set her hand down on the bench, near his, not touching. He did not pull his hand back. He did not move it to meet hers. A long moment. From the back door, Micah called in, "Dad, the car's running clean." Neither moved right away. After a moment he said, "Lo, want to come watch?" She nodded. They walked out the back together. He set Micah on his shoulders, though the boy was getting too big. Lenora walked next to them, not close. They stood at the edge of the test pad and watched the chassis run smooth in the long Carolina light. The car ran clean. And somewhere in that sound was a memo a man had written, a promise a wife had kept, and a quiet that, for the first time in 7 years, did not feel like absence.